A 39-year-old haulage firm owner from County Offaly, who organised the movement of drugs and cash between Europe, Ireland and the UK, has been jailed for 14 years and 8 months in Liverpool today. Thomas Maher, who lived in Wiltshire Close in Warrington, was involved in smuggling at least €1.5 million worth of cocaine into Ireland and moving almost €1 million out of the country.
Warrington, early morning. A quiet residential street, the kind where nothing ever seems out of place. But on this day, police officers closed in on a detached home that had drawn far too much attention. No shouting. No chase. Just methodical precision. Behind that door, investigators found a world far removed from suburban normality: high-end watches, designer clothes, and 4 luxury cars parked neatly on the driveway. A Range Rover. A Porsche Cayenne. A Mercedes GLS. Even a Corvette. Together, they are worth more than £200,000. But what shocked detectives wasn't the wealth, it was what it represented. Documents, encrypted notes, and digital traces linked the homeowner to an international web stretching across Ireland, the Netherlands, Spain, and even Asia. A man quietly coordinating a multi-million-pound drug trafficking network from the comfort of his living room. His name was Thomas Maher. A respected haulier, a family man, and to most, just another face in the crowd. But beneath the quiet exterior, Maher wasn't moving goods, he was moving cocaine. And the operation he built would soon unravel in one of the most significant breakthroughs in modern law enforcement. If you think stories like this can't unfold in streets just like yours, think again. Subscribe now, because the next name we uncover might be one closer than you think. Thomas Maher was born and raised in Warrington, Cheshire, a place known more for its industry and family life than international crime. Those who knew him described him as quiet, organized, and polite. Nothing about him stood out. He blended in. Maher built his reputation through hard work in the haulage and transport business, a trade that demands precision, timing, and trust. He ran legitimate logistics operations for years, moving goods across Europe, building contacts with drivers, freight companies, and customs officials. To the outside world, he was a businessman with a steady income and a knack for efficiency. But behind that professionalism, Maher had begun to see something most people in his industry didn't: how the same systems used to move goods could also move drugs. The same routes, the same trucks, the same documentation, just with different cargo. He was disciplined, calculated, and patient, qualities that made him valuable in the logistics trade and, later, indispensable in organized crime. Investigators would later describe him as someone who knew how to make things disappear, not by violence, but by paperwork and planning. At home, Maher maintained the image of a family man. He lived comfortably, not extravagantly, and kept to himself. To neighbors, he was just another working professional. Someone who earned his success through long hours and determination. But underneath that image, his ambitions were evolving. The line between legal business and criminal opportunity was thinning. For Maher, logistics wasn't just a trade anymore, it was a gateway. And soon, the skills that once kept his business running would become the backbone of a cocaine trafficking network spanning continents. By the late 2010s, Thomas Maher's haulage business had taken on a new purpose. What began as a legitimate transport operation slowly turned into a front, a carefully disguised gateway for organized smuggling across Europe. Official records later revealed Maher's growing network of international contacts, with ties reaching into Ireland, the Netherlands, and Spain. His trucks were no longer just moving fruit and freight. Hidden beneath legitimate loads were consignments of cocaine, heroin, and cash. Each journey was planned with military precision, each driver carefully chosen. To coordinate these operations, Maher turned to encrypted technology. On the underground network known as EncroChat, he operated under the handles Satirical and Snacker. There, messages moved freely between criminal figures, coded conversations about cash runs, transport routes, and exchange points. Maher wasn't a street criminal, he was a logistics strategist. the man who made the routes work. His first successful runs went unnoticed. Shipments traveled from Ireland to mainland Europe and back again, hidden within legitimate consignments, tracked through falsified delivery records. Each success built his credibility. Each trip earned him trust within multiple cartels who valued his reliability and silence. Maher had become what investigators would later call an invisible coordinator. He rarely handled the drugs himself, never met the couriers face to face, and kept his fingerprints off every stage of the process. To law enforcement, he appeared to be an ordinary businessman. But to the cartels, he was the man who could make millions move undetected. In his world, success meant staying unseen. And for a while, Thomas Maher was exactly that, invisible. As the COVID-19 lockdowns brought Europe to a standstill, Thomas Maher's operation was expanding. While legitimate trade slowed, his network of trucks kept rolling, moving through routes that connected Ireland, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Spain, and even Turkey. To investigators, it would later appear as though Maher had found a way to turn global disruption into opportunity. From his home in Warrington, Maher continued to coordinate shipments with clinical precision. Each consignment was tracked, timed, and accounted for through encrypted communication. Couriers sent photos of banknotes with visible serial numbers to confirm payments, a meticulous system of verification that left no room for verbal confirmation or loose ends. During this period, his network grew stronger through a partnership with Paul O'Brien, an associate from West London who operated under the EncroChat handle the One Diamond G. Together, they organized multi-million-pound transactions, arranging the transport of drugs and laundering of cash through sophisticated routes designed to bypass scrutiny. Maher's precision earned him a steady profit. His role was simple: oversee logistics, take 1% from every deal, and stay out of sight. It was enough to generate thousands each week, invisible income from invisible trade. His family life carried on as normal, his modest home masking the machinery of a transnational drug network. But while Maher believed he'd perfected invisibility, someone else had already stepped inside his network. His messages, his routes, his secrets, all quietly recorded. If you think the UK's underworld ended with arrests like this, you're already behind. Subscribe now, because while you scroll, someone's planning the next shipment. By 2020, Thomas Maher's empire was running at full capacity. His fleet of haulage trucks, marked with legitimate business fronts, carried goods declared as fruit and wine. But hidden among those deliveries were tightly wrapped packages of cocaine and heroin, concealed within everyday shipments that crossed borders without raising suspicion. Investigators later uncovered how Maher operated his logistics like a military campaign. Every movement was mapped, photographed, and logged. He tracked routes, drivers, and schedules with the discipline of a strategist, ensuring each link in the chain remained invisible to border inspections. Yet behind the modest facade of a Warrington businessman, Maher's life told another story. Luxury vehicles sat in his driveway: Audis, BMWs, and a Land Rover. Inside his home, officers would later find designer watches, gold, and high-end art. His official records, however, showed a man earning just a fraction of what he was spending. It was those financial inconsistencies that first drew the attention of the National Crime Agency. Investigators began piecing together the gaps: a man living beyond his declared income, moving money through shell companies, and making frequent international calls tied to known trafficking routes. To Maher, EncroChat had become both shield and sanctuary, the encrypted network where his plans, payments, and partners existed beyond law enforcement's reach. But in reality, that same system was turning against him. Every coded message, every encrypted exchange, was being quietly collected, line by line. The empire he built on secrecy was now being mapped by those he could not see. And the silence he trusted most was already recording his downfall. In early 2020, French and Dutch investigators achieved what organized crime believed to be impossible: they cracked EncroChat. The supposedly unbreakable encrypted platform, used by thousands of criminals across Europe, was silently compromised. Every message sent, every image shared, was now being read in real time by law enforcement. Unaware of the breach, Thomas Maher continued his operations as normal. Day after day, he sent detailed instructions, times, routes, cash transfers, and courier codes. His precision, once his greatest strength, became his undoing. Investigators were no longer guessing. They were watching. Across the Irish Sea, the Gardaí were already moving in. In April 2020, officers intercepted a courier in Drogheda, seizing £600,000 in cash, funds traced directly to Maher's network. What he didn't know was that the message confirming the delivery had already been copied and logged. Then, in June, an alert spread across EncroChat devices worldwide, system compromised. Power off immediately. For most, it came as a shock. For Maher, it was already too late. Every conversation, every transaction, every coded reference to a shipment or payment, captured. For Thomas Maher, that final message wasn't a warning. It was a countdown, the moment his empire began to collapse from the inside. On the morning of June 13, 2020, National Crime Agency officers surrounded a detached house in Warrington. There was no chase, no struggle, only the quiet efficiency of an operation months in the making. Inside, they arrested Thomas Maher, the man who had built a European drug network from his living room. When investigators searched the property, the encrypted devices were gone. But they didn't need them. Every message Maher had ever sent through EncroChat, every instruction, every coded reference, had already been decrypted, stored, and linked directly to him. During questioning, detectives uncovered a connection that reignited public attention. Maher's previous ownership of the lorry involved in the 2019 Essex migrant tragedy, where 39 Vietnamese nationals lost their lives. While he was not charged in relation to the deaths, the link revealed just how close his operations had come to some of the darkest moments in Britain's criminal history. In court, prosecutors presented hundreds of decrypted EncroChat messages showing Maher's role in coordinating the movement of cocaine, laundering of cash, and collaboration with his associate Paul O'Brien, known online as One Diamond G. Their communications mapped an entire underground economy, routes across Europe, money trails through Ireland and Spain, and logistics disguised as legitimate freight. Maher pleaded guilty to 4 counts of conspiracy relating to drug trafficking and money laundering. He was sentenced to 14 years and 8 months in prison. Paul O'Brien received 21 years for his part in the same network. The empire built on encrypted messages had vanished, undone by the very technology that promised to protect it. The digital walls he trusted most became the evidence that sealed his fate. These cases vanish from the headlines fast. But the networks behind them don't. Subscribe before the next story breaks, or you'll only hear about it when it's too late. By May 2023, Thomas Maher's story reached its final reckoning. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, the National Crime Agency secured a confiscation order of £629,000, a sum calculated from the criminal profits he had made as Europe's so-called invisible transporter. The order covered his remaining assets: luxury cars, gold, jewelry, and his home in Warrington. If Maher fails to repay the amount, he faces an additional 6 years behind bars. The NCA described the decision as a warning to others. Even after conviction, the proceeds of organized crime will be stripped away, piece by piece. Following his imprisonment, Maher became subject to a serious crime prevention order. For years after release, his communications, finances, and movements will remain under strict control. A legal leash designed to prevent him from rebuilding the network he once commanded. His fall marked a turning point for investigators across Europe. The so-called invisible operators, the men who hid behind logistics firms, encrypted phones, and false paperwork, were no longer out of reach. The EncroChat takedown had exposed an entire tier of organized crime once thought untouchable. In the end, Thomas Maher turned transport into trafficking, logistics into laundering, and his own home into the headquarters of a European drug network. But when the messages stopped, so did the illusion of control. What he built on silence was destroyed by it. Thomas Maher built an empire from his sofa and thought no one could see him. But the silence was never safe, the walls were already listening. Should the masterminds who operate in silence face harsher punishment than those on the streets? Let us know what you think in the comments. If this story gripped you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because the next case might be happening closer to you than you think.